Every once in a while, there comes a time when something happens in a Wheel of Time book, and we here at Through the Glass Columns are here to discuss it. I, of course, am your host, Greg, who thinks something happened this chapter. I don't know. It at least happened in between the two chapters. And I am joined by Tylor, who will hopefully dispel the clouds of war and tell us all what happened. Tylor, what is going on, my friend?
First off, I just want to do something that I never do, which is do a fun intro. In a world. Okay, now we're good to go. Yeah, I think that these two chapters are extremely well named, and you're identifying why. We are this week talking about Chapter 22, Gathering Clouds, and Chapter 23, Fog of War, Storm of Battle, and the fact that those are all describing the things that are around the battle instead of the battle itself is exactly the way you should be thinking. Now, we'll dive into more of the details going forward, but I do actually want to just, for a moment, correct the record about something that I had been on record on the past couple of weeks. Do I think Book 8 is a slog? Absolutely. Does that mean that it doesn't have some real good stuff? No. And I think this week qualifies. I have to say, Book 8 for me is a really bad book for everyone who isn't Rand. But Rand's story is interesting. What was your take on this week?
I did in general like that we finally had something happen. And again, I think I'm going back 2 or 3 weeks at this point. It's all a fog of podcasting, where I said like, oh, maybe we're just digging down and then something big will happen and we'll dig our way back out. And you know, there are precedents for this in other series and so on. And I don't think that's true. I think we're confirmed. We're now about 100 pages from the end, and it seems like this is the biggest moment. And I don't anticipate like a lot is going to happen in any other plot line, especially based on what you just said. But at the same time, it's not like this was this fit Robert Jordan in that it mostly happened off screen, right? Like It felt to me very much. I actually found myself thinking of the Hobbit book a lot, because you know, you build up to this big battle and Bilbo Baggins, sorry, spoilers for the Hobbit, I guess, he gets knocked out and he doesn't participate in the whole battle, and eventually they find him like the next day and they're like, yeah, there was a battle. Of course, Peter Jackson did not
that
choose
passed out moment into an entire movie.
Yeah, right. Although I just saw him pop up in a really funny cameo in a movie where he's like, somebody's like, are you here to make a movie? And he's like, I don't make movies, I make trilogies. So I was like, okay, at least he gets his own brand and how ridiculous it is. So so that gave me hope,
because he was nominated for an Oscar for a non-trilogy movie.
Yes. So I think this was both satisfying and not in that way. And, you know, I think we've seen in the past, it's actually better when Robert Jordan doesn't take us into like the blow by blow. And so to deal with more of the aftermath and what that is makes sense. But at the same time, it is kind of almost like blink and you miss it. So I want to unpack it a little more.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And there's not too much else to say big picture, because these are fairly similar chapters and we don't want to give away too much for the second one. So I'm just going to dive into Chapter 22, Gathering Clouds. Rand lines up an army of Saldeans and his new legion, led by a man named Jack Masand. Rand watches the Ashaman all strong enough to weave a gateway, and he apparently started channeling in the tent so no one would see him, because he is now getting dizzy whenever he starts to channel. He thinks that the source being tainted is even somehow worse in this area, and then Rand thinks of Semirog, and Lews Therin chimes in saying that Semirog never gives in. The nobles are upset that the army is relatively small, and Rand knows that the Ashaman are the real power, but he's brought a fairly large army. Rand has to threaten Wiraman to get him in line, and several nobles approach Rand saying that they should not go to battle themselves, and they mention that Rand has a care for women, which seems to shock Rand because he didn't know that that was something that was well known. It actually takes Rand out of the void entirely. Rand then offers for them to stay at the Black Tower instead of being in the battle, and they immediately change their mind about what they want. Rand then orders them to begin, and the Ashaman channel 8 gateways, which the army begins to move through, but Rand goes first. Lews Therin wants to kill all of the Ashaman as they channel, and Rand seems to be questioning even the loyalty of Narishma and some of the other Aes Sedai who are in his service, and then he remembers a man in the Two Rivers who starved over paranoia and thinks that he may be experiencing the same paranoia. Rand then enters Altara, and Bashir warns him against taking risks like going first, but Rand thinks that he can barely trust Flynn and Narishma, and they're the ones who saved his life, and so he has to do things on his own. He briefly discusses with Bashir a fallen statue of a conqueror queen, and Bashir says that the moral of the story is that you don't risk your life. Suddenly, two archers fire at Rand, and the arrows miss, and the man is killed by channeling. Rand loses Saidin and immediately becomes sick. Rand recognizes the assassin as one of Bren's men, who apparently was bribed, and the Ashaman seem to think that it was the Aes Sedai who paid him. As they leave, Lews Therin asks Rand if he is ready to kill, and Rand replies, not yet. We then switch into Asid Bakun's perspective, which I won't remember, much less Greg at the end of this book, and he looks over the Seanchan camp. He watches the local recruits and then talks to one of the Seldam, who says the Damane have all been unwell when they are near Ibu Dar. A Raken then appears with a message reporting a large army fairly nearby. Asid says that the Damane will take care of them, but the Seldam is worried about the new Aes Sedai weapon. Asid worries how the army got so close unnoticed, and then the the Damane report 50 are dead, including Ericombe, as I wrote something down from another chapter wrong, I think. That's not a sentence that was in this chapter. Asid looks over his troops. Greg, what did we think of chapter 22, Gathering Clouds?
I mean, you said it right at the beginning. This is exactly what is promised, right? The metaphor of gathering clouds, and it's like, oh, the army is going. I think what stood out to me most is we've kind of seen this playbook played before, which is we're about to go through a gate, and there's a random assassin that just takes a shot. And I think, both in my thinking and in your summary, it's like, well, your explanation's a little too easy. What's really going on here, and what's the larger picture? So, but other than that, it's like I was feeling that good, like, Act 2 going into Act 3 momentum of like, it's on, let's do this. So It was generally pretty pleasing.
Okay. So why don't we then start with Rand and his mental and physical state? Because there are some odd updates here, and it's kind of hard to place exactly where they all fit together. So one is that Rand seems to be having trouble holding on to Saidin, and he seems to be getting dizzy and nauseous when he tries to channel. This is also tied up. Several of the Ashaman in this chapter mention that it is difficult to channel, or there's something odd about Saidin, and so it's unclear how much of that is what's going on with Rand versus something that's Rand specific. And then we also get some odd interactions with Lews Therin across this chapter, where Lews is kind of constantly chiming in, as he has been, about the Ashaman, but also seems almost interested in what's going on in a way that maybe he hadn't in the past. So what's your kind of overall thoughts on Rand and where he's at in this chapter?
I think the most surprising to me was that channeling is taking so much out of him, and it definitely felt like one of those where, like, did I pay too little attention? I mean, he'd been working on the taint and was, sorry, it sounds wrong, as it were, and I think he had been concerned about its effects, but I hadn't recalled that it was kind of making him physically react to such a degree. And that, to me, was like, wait, what's going on here? How did that come to be? And then I think second order problem in my book is like his ongoing fights with Lews Therin, which felt different in some regard. I mean, it felt like so far this book, Lews Therin is just there. He's back to just say, like, kill, 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 kill. And it's a little different here.
Yeah, I think that's right. I do want to kind of dig a little deeper about something that appears here with Rand, and also at the end of the chapter. Apparently the Damane seem to be experiencing the same thing, where both Saidin and apparently Saidar are difficult to channel, and the Damane at the end of the chapter are mentioned as being unwell, and so maybe they're experiencing the same sort of nausea that Rand is. And this is all described as being something that is happening in this region. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on what is causing this, because this is a region we've been in recently. This is where the Bowl of the Winds was used. This is where we had, at the beginning of the book, the explosion that was caused by unweaving the gateway. And so I'm curious what you're thinking is the source of this kind of oddity that seems to be centered around Ibu Dar.
Well, and I just want to confirm a fact first. So Rand at the very beginning of this chapter is already in this region. He's passed through the gate and he's here, even though I think I read some of the like, we're gathering everybody into formation so we can march through the gate, but we should
Yeah,
not
I
interpret it that way.
I think that is correct. They're forming up to march through the gate, but it seems like Rand is kind of doing like 40, 50-mile leaps. So he was probably like in Altara, but not yet on the front line. And then this was probably a leap right to the front line.
Well, the thing that comes to mind is that something has made the power unstable in this region. And the best clue I think that is out there is the opening prologue, which reminded us of the giant statue off the coast of this region, right? That is not that far away, and could be the source of something that's going wrong. I mean, I had always kind of interpreted those two giant statues as like the big like focal points of the two sides of the power, and I wonder if they're getting stronger or not.
So I do want to slightly add something here. We do know one of the two statues is a Saangriel. So it's worth noting the other likely is as well. So it's not necessarily a source of the power, but it's the most powerful thing you could tap into to increase your power. And specifically the one that is south of here in the ocean is associated with the female half of the power. And so that would be a really good what is going on with the Damane, but it might not as much be a good explanation for what's happening with Rand and what's going on with him.
Although Rand has powerful relics on his person that I was almost wondering if like the frequencies mixed with each other wrong or something like that. Like it's a part
It's
of
certainly
that.
possible. Yeah.
But it also feels like if we want to throw back in the explosion and some of those other things, then it's probably something bigger going on. And then the other question is like, well, we haven't checked in with the Darksiders for a while. Like presumably, and we've noted a few times in this book that big chunks of time are disappearing in a way they don't always in this book. So, it's like when you play one of those really good real-time strategy games and you're like, oh, I'm so strong all of a sudden, like I'm going to own this. And then you're like, oh, right, the enemies I haven't been seeing have also been leveling up during that time. So it feels like it could be something like that. Maybe, and all of this feels like a tease for the next book. Like, if anything, it might create a cliffhanger in these last 100 pages or 150 pages, and then we'll find out what the explanation is next book.
Yeah, I think that's right. The next thing I want to jump to is the assassination attempt. And I think you're exactly right to call out that it happens the way we've seen before, and it just feels too easy, right? Like someone shows up, they fire at Rand, they miss conveniently, and then immediately they're engulfed by flames from several Ashaman. And so I'm kind of left here wondering, is this like a real solid assassination attempt? Is it like a false flag in some way? What's going on here? Because I think in the intro, you said something like it was too easy. That feels right.
Yeah, it certainly felt more like this is a conspiracy of some kind, not at all the actual Darksiders trying to take an attempt. And especially with how they clean it up so quickly and easily, like you're saying, right? And, I think this is a trope in a lot of genres. I mean, murder mysteries most obviously, but like, oh, there's the one guy who can answer our question, and as he draws breath to speak, oops, he's dead and gone. So it felt very convenient. And I think for me, the primary suspect about all of that, both because they offer the explanation first and just because they're here, are the Ashaman. And thinking about Taim, and he would probably have factions within the Black Tower that would be working in his favor.
And that's actually the next thing that I wanted to highlight here, is that a decent chunk of this chapter is spent with Rand thinking, I cannot trust the Ashaman who are from the Black Tower. Right? That seems like a given for him. And then he kind of spends a lot of this chapter running through the names of the Ashaman who are on his side and trying to decide if he can trust them. And he seems to kind of decide, like, Dashiva maybe a tiny bit, but the only two who he really seems confident in are Flynn, because Flynn healed him when he was dying, and Narishma, because Narishma got whatever the bundle is that Rand still has on his saddle. So if those are the only people Rand feels like he can trust, he's wondering about paranoia, but I think you're also right to highlight just how few people in the Ashaman really are probably actually on his side.
Well, and then I start to trace the larger arc of that plot, which is like, it was kind of like, oh, I'm going to do this little side project where I raise an army. And then it was like, it felt like 5 pages later. It's like, okay, I have an army of black dudes. Here are their ranks. Here's like the way they get their merit badges.
Black Tower dudes, Greg. Black Tower dudes.
Sorry. And so all of that just kind of happened so quickly. It feels like, why on earth would he trust them? And now he doesn't. And it's, it's like, whatever internet meme. It's like, well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions, right? Like, It feels very much like that.
And speaking of the consequences of his own actions, hey, guess what? If you go on your own through a gateway, someone can shoot you and there's no one else to help. Like, Rand has made this mistake 5 times, and it seems like he is just not learning the lesson.
And I mean, it's in this moment he's like, well, at least I'm Ta'Veren, so that probably is what saved me. Cool. And it's very casual in how he dismisses it as well. So I think that makes it easy for me to dismiss as not serious, but at the same time, I'm like, well, but then maybe there's something more to it if everybody's not taking it serious.
I think all the way back in like book 5, when Moraine was still with the group, there was a brief discussion between Rand and Moraine, something like Rand saying, well, I know I'm going to die on Dragonmount, and so I don't have to worry about it happening before that. And Moraine kind of being like, no, you need to be more careful. And it feels like Rand is back to that way of thinking. Like, I'm prophesied to die somewhere else. I don't got to worry about today.
The Bad Boys 3 plotline, as we've previously established in this podcast series.
Any thoughts on Acid Bakun or the Seanchan broadly? This is the half of the chapter where it's just kind of like, hey, guess what? The Seanchan are here. I don't really have much to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny little moment because it's like, what? An army just approached, and it is the reverse of... No, I guess it is just standard dramatic irony, where it's like, yeah, we know exactly what this is, and it's not a mystery or a surprise to us. And while it's a little interesting to hear how they would react to that, it's like such a foregone conclusion. It's hard to know exactly why it's here. I think it... Oh, go ahead. Nope,
I was going to say, it feels like the thing that they're trying to get here is that the Damane are also suffering from whatever the Ashaman are. It feels like the big piece of information. But given that we've discussed that, it's a camp.
Well, and I was going to go even dumber than that, which is I think they're just reminding us that within that army, that's the main source of power, that there's, getting that vocabulary down again. And, it's interesting because they have big beasties and things like that, but we really hear about them much less than we do the channelers that are completely in the thrall of their masters. And so, I think you're right. That's the main power, and it's not working exactly right, seems to be the point.
Awesome. Any last thoughts before we dive into chapter 23?
I mean, it feels like we just zipped through that, and I think that's just the kind of typical of the action type of chapters, or we got the kind of main beats. But it is a very weird feeling to kind of get all that at once. That's what I was trying to describe in the opening, where it's like, well, we've been waiting for things to happen for a long time. And then it's like, zip, 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 and onward. And so, and I think that feeling continues in the summary that you are about to give us.
Of chapter 23, Fog of War, Storm of Battle, Rand looks over scattered bodies on a battlefield. Lews Therin and Rand agree that the dead cry out to them, and the soldiers seem to be impatient, but Rand has avoided entering the battle himself. Rand observes several lords playing cards, and Flynn healing the injured. Rand is reassured about the losses by Bashir, and watches the captive Seanchan, including Suldam, who Rand refuses to execute, and he declares that women will be kept as captive if they are brought in. Rand says that he will give them to the Aes Sedai eventually, and the Damane are the Suldam attempts to flee, but an Ashaman scout reports that 30 miles away there is a large army, and Rand has already mentally added Gilly the Damane, who was described by the Suldam, to his list of dead women. We then switch into Furyk Kharid's perspective, who receives a scouting report from a Raken. He is a property of the Empress and proud of it, and he is a member of the royal family's guard. Kharid insists that the force they face is too spread out to be able to succeed, but Kharid says that they are now that they are here to sweep up the remnants because the battle must already mostly be over. However, then he gets another report that the army 50 miles away is suddenly much closer. Suddenly there are shouts, and all around Ashaman begin to channel as Kharid ignores it, trying to rally the troops, saying that he will save whatever can be saved. We then switch into Rand's perspective, who watches smoke rise from a valley where Ashaman are doing battle. It is 5 days since his arrival in Altara, and the army has learned to strike at Raken so that they're not able to scout their positions. Rand adopts one of Luz Theron's habits, and that surprises him, but Luz remains silent during this discussion. And Ashaman brings a Seanchan prisoner, and Rand thinks he is only inspecting the prisoners to make it seem like he has something to do. The Ashaman, named Nalam, says that Saidin feels strange here, and it's getting worse the closer they get to the city, and this is something that all of the Ashaman seem to agree on. Rand counts up the 23 Saldam who have been captured, as well as 2 Damane, and remembers that the Damane are very dangerous even if they are freed, and he thinks of one of them who caused dozens of injuries when she was released because she didn't want to be free. He thinks on the hundreds of individuals who have been lost, as well as 8 Ashaman. Rand sends Flynn and Deshiva to urge the Ashaman to press the attack against the retreating Seanchan, and Flynn seems worried about leaving Rand alone, but he eventually follows the order. Abruptly, Rand is separated from Saidin and in pain. He releases Saidin and collapses as there is an arrow in his side. Seanchan charge, and Rand is unable to grasp Saidin and protect himself, but his allies arrive and cause chaos but protect him. As there is a discussion about whether Rand will make it, 2 of the female nobles who are watching him stand guard over him, and one of them draws a knife, and Rand is unsure whether it is to finish him off or to protect him. Bashir then sees Rand and summons the Ashaman. Mor, one of the Ashaman, heals Rand, who has to silence Luz as he is repeatedly screaming about killing the Ashaman. Rand then studies Elil, one of the female nobles, and worries that she may have wanted to finish him with her knife. Gregorin then apologizes for vacating the flank that the Seanchan army charged through, and Bashir and Gedwin both report that the Seanchan are fleeing towards Ibudar. Bashir says that the campaign is won, but so many of the other nobles argue that they need to advance. Luz Theron says that Rand is mad, and Bashir says there is only one more thing to potentially do, and it is to take Ibudar, but he seems to think that is unnecessary. Rand then decides to press on. So what did we think about Fog of War, Storm of Battle?
So certainly the opening of this chapter is the moment where I was like, wait, what? Like, it all just happened off screen, and obviously the Hobbit moment I mentioned before is that, right? It was like, oh, okay, we're gonna just skip over that part. And then by the time we get to those later stages, there is a little more kind of on-screen action. But I will just say then, as I think about how long we've built up the Seanchan as a threat to this continent and that needs to be dealt with, this feels far too easy, right? That you're just kind of jumping every 40 to 50 miles, slicing them up and moving on. And this is like, oh, good, it's done. And especially because that will have happened in roughly a chapter, like not even 2, or I guess 2 technically. It feels like this is even less of the end of the Seanchan than book 2 was. That, like, I fully expect basically all these advances to be undone, even potentially by the end of the book, because it just feels like this is just silly, and it's, I want to Admiral Akbar, it's a trap.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I do want to note, when Rand summarizes the losses from this campaign, his losses are several hundred of retainers, several hundred Saldeans, and then 8 Ashaman. And 8 Ashaman is not a huge number, and I think it's soldiers and dedicated, not full Ashaman who are lost. But it's worth noting, Rand, I think, brought 60 Ashaman on this venture, so his losses are over 10%, which is pretty significant. But you're right, it should require all of the Ashaman to throw out the invading army. It does feel a little easy here. I'm curious your thoughts on how Rand is handling that, because it seems like early on in this chapter, everything's kind of going well, but he's not mentally quite there.
Well, just to agree that I did clock that he was essentially like, okay, we have too many losses here. Like the percentages that you're saying are like, okay, it's not as efficient as we need it to be. And yet at the same time, even though there are moments where he's like, oh, I got to record that name or I have to think about that, he feels colder and more calculated. And I think that it feels like an open question whether that's madness desensitizing him to, the world around him, or is this just what military leaders are required to do, right? I mean, I think of my military experience in Risk, where like you put the 20 against the 8, and if the dice are not going your way, you end up with 3 there, but you're like, that's what it took to get to that one, and we'll regroup and do it next turn. And it feels very much like that. Like it could just be kind of the coldness of sharp command instead of madness.
Well, and I think you're exactly right to highlight how kind of calculating he seems in this chapter. But there is one thing that I think is less cold and calculating than we had previously anticipated. I think at the end of the last book, when Rand had used balefire on the female Aiel, your response was like, he's not going back. Like, it's over, it's done, this is a man who harms women now, right? But that doesn't seem to be the case. He is explicitly telling the Ashaman, don't kill Suldam, who, to be clear, are women who put collars on other women and force them into slavery for the rest of their life. Like, if there's any women to kill, it's probably those ones.
Yeah, and there's, as you summarize, there's the moment where those rules of Rand's head are kind of brought up again in the context of the woman he's sorry passed. So I think I'm struggling with what is going on here because, it's like broad strokes, like the greatest force set against him before the Dark One now appears to be the Aes Sedai who captured him and were way more of a threat than the Seanchan were. And at the same time, it's like, well, you're not going to be able to clean this off your board if you're refusing to hurt women as a part of this. You then add in the fact that he's like, oh, and I have all these dudes I definitely don't trust. It's like, well, what's left, man? Like,
yeah. Well, and I think that's Rand's dilemma at this point. It's actually really hard as a reader to kind of figure out how much of this dedication to women is the good Rand that we want to be winning the battle, and it's the thing that we should be holding on to, right? Kadzuan has made her kind of thesis statement, Rand needs to laugh and cry. This feels like the closest to laughing and crying Rand we have right now. But simultaneously, I think there is at least an argument that Rand is taking this so far. We should be debating about whether his unwillingness to do any harm to any women is at least a sign of madness. Like, I don't want to say violence against women is a thing we should be doing. It's not. But, like, it feels a little far the way he's taking this.
Well, and again, I think diagnosing always fictional, like we're leaving aside real men, but diagnosing his madness when it feels like, in the context you were just talking about, the voice in his head is the rational side of this, right? Which is essentially saying, like, yes, kill the ones who are your actual threat. Don't worry about this. And, in some ways that makes it feel more like it is loose there and not madness. But I think, I don't want to pretend I can parse all of these, but the grand effect of it all is like Rand's a hot mess, right? Like he doesn't have a firm reality or a firm grasp on the reality of who he wants to fight, who he doesn't. And the choices he's making seem illogical. Or maybe that's not fair. They have a logic, but it doesn't seem to match the material conditions of his situation.
Yeah, and I think it's now starting to cost not just himself, but his allies, right? I think they list several dead and dozens injured as a result of Rand trying to free a Damane without understanding that Damane are so broken they want to stay in chains. And the fact that he isn't taking that information and changing his strategy at all feels like the definition of just like trying the same thing over and over and over again.
Well, it's kind of funny because the reason I can imagine why he would want to be sensitive is, not to, I'm going to mix up the two words, not to the masters, but to the slaves, is what he witnessed Egwene going through. But it's not like he's thinking about her whatsoever, right? Like there's no mention of Egwene. There's no mention of his previous engagement of the Seanchan as the reasoning behind that. It's just, again, they're women, let's not touch them and let's keep them safe. So it's bizarre. I think it doesn't feel to me like something that's like a major plot point that's going to be revealed, but more that like we should just be understanding that Rand has a very loose grasp on the actual situation he's in.
I think that's right. The only other note I have here is Rand adds a Damane to the list in his head. Any additional thoughts on that?
I mean, not really. I've just been spending a lot of time. I'm doing Maul Shadow Lord recaps on Rebel Base Card podcast. So I've been thinking a lot about vengeance and lists in your head and so on. And so it's funny in the context of thinking so much about that, a character that keeps the list of who he's let down as opposed to who he wants to kill, right? This isn't the Arya Stark, like, what's my list of who I need to kill before I can rest? And like, he continues to be surrounded, and this is dipping back into last chapter. He's got it's this chapter. He's got like these noble women like around, and like they're kind of terrible, but like that's not motivating him really, or they're just kind of there and also complaining about things. And the kind of that links back to last week when it's like, oh, you're coming along, and it's like, wait, why? And so on. So I think it's feeling to me that the fog of war is both like, yep, we're just pushing through this campaign. And also I think it's supposed to feel increasingly foggy. Rand is feeling foggy. We are feeling foggy about Rand. I think it's just all working. And I hope that we get some kind of clarifying moment by the end of this book, like something that just kind of makes us a little more clear. I'm not expecting a Sixth Sense, now go back and reconsider everything type of twist, but something that kind of clarifies how we should read what Rand has been through.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I can't promise anything because that's how this podcast works. When I said Asid Bakun, I was just like, I'm not going to remember that name. Hey, Greg, Furyk Kharid. This one should probably be in your head. He was the Seanchan leader. He is apparently a member of the royal guard of the royal family of the Seanchan, and he orders a retreat. There's actually nothing in here. I just need you to remember his name.
Feels like a mini boss, right? We're not talking about the Koopas. We're talking about some kind of Bowser child, and then we'll go find Bowser later.
That was the single best video game you could have chosen for the mini boss metaphor. Thank you. We then skip all the battle. It's 5 days later. The campaign is more or less done. Rand is looking over things through a tree line, so he can't see anything, which, like, bro, you can travel. Just go to the other side of the tree line. What was your thought on kind of how little we get here? I know you've referenced it a few times, but, like, basically zero channeling by anyone on screen for a giant channeling battle that has apparently been going on for 5 days.
I mean, we talked at some point now, probably like 4 or 5 weeks ago, about how, like, as we start to see the vast expansion of the traveling, that the tactics of the battle would need to change. I think we talked about it in the context of Egwene's siege of Tar Valon someday, but in this context, it's like it's just fast and easy. Like, maybe that's part of why the battle is so fast. It's like, let's jump a few in behind enemy lines, hit them quick, get out fast, right? Classic Hamilton.
Honestly, my biggest complaint about this chapter is the idea that the Seanchan could retreat without having 8 Ashaman behind their ranks. Like, retreat shouldn't be a thing with channeling, is my biggest complaint about the tactics here.
But then I do kind of like this shift from Rand being, I need to be on the front lines doing everything, to I'm going to stay back here and just watch. And, again, it's a leveling up. I mean, all the armed forces complain about this, right? The higher your promotion is, the farther you are from actual action. Yep. And that seems to be a part of what's going on here. And so it's all logical. But if I'm honest, it kind of makes it not that exciting to read. It's like, okay, smoke in a valley, must be cool. There's a classic Simpsons where Marge goes there. I think they kind of walk by like a carnival, and Marge is like, wow, I wonder what that is. We'll have to read about it in the paper tomorrow. And it feels kind of like that. Like, oh, okay. Like, oh, there's got to be something awesome over there, but we'll just figure it out later.
That's correct. I then want to just note an oddity at the beginning of this chapter. Rand does not hear Lews Therin at all, but acts like Lews Therin and catches himself. And it has me wondering how much of this General Rand is Rand by the end of that
Who's driving the bus?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's driving the bus? That feels fair as we've unpacked it tonight. I can't pretend I thought that, but it feels not unlike when Matt's other persona takes over Matt. Right? Yeah, I have the right person there. Yep. That guy who used to be in these books.
Who he's just was foggy in in Egwene's dreams and hasn't been mentioned otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. What's funny is how that resonates with how his actor disappeared and then came back as a new guy. So they were just a few books too early.
Correct. I then just want to note, hey, guess what? Rand does the same dumb thing a second chapter in a row. In the previous chapter, he's like, I can go through the gateway first. And in this chapter, he's like, hey, Flynn, go away. I don't need anyone to protect me. And then immediately gets shot with an arrow. Like, this is dumb by Rand at this point. Like, it's not even madness. It's just like, that kid's stupid.
I'm thinking of George W. Bush and his pillows, right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. Well, you just can't fool me twice. That's how it works, right? Yeah. So it feels a little like that, and that's the quality of leadership we're seeing. Simpler times when that was our biggest concern in the world. Know what? It's just mind-boggling.
I'd take it right now. I would love that.
So take it right now.
I then want to talk about the two women who are with Rand in this scene, right? They are on the front lines a little bit because Rand doesn't trust them. He has them around him and at one point is like, don't worry, Dahmer, the ladies can protect me, almost like as a joke, but they're literally the only people around him when this attack comes. And then we get the interesting moment where one of them draws a knife as the battle is approaching, and Rand legitimately does not know if it is to finish him off or protect him. And this kind of exposes the big flaw in Rand's strategy of surround yourself with people you don't trust so they can die for you. It means you're surrounded by people you don't trust.
Oh, man. On my other podcast, my movie podcast, we just talked about a movie that maybe is out right now that has a scene almost identical to this, right? Like character holding a knife and what are they doing? So I will avoid that spoiler. But I do think that in addition to Rand being foolish, it's like, again, another question of who do you surround yourself with, right? And maybe Robert Jordan is trying to say that this is the burden of power, is you can't trust anybody. And, you know, I mean, it's the Ides of March, right? like who's there and what is their motivation? You can't know. And everybody's going to come for the biggest guy in the yard. So
I think we had maybe mentioned this like 6 books ago, but I don't think we've referenced it any time recently, so I'm going to bring it up. Robert Jordan had often said that his kind of thesis statement for this series was something along the lines of, what if being the hero of the story was a really, really terrible thing to be? And I think even more than the first couple of books, we're really seeing that now, right? In fantasy novels, typically the story is the young boy leaves the village and everything goes well for them. And Robert Jordan's like, oh no, what if it sucked?
And it has increasingly. And so, you know, I will say as we start to think about we're in wrap-up mode, or we're not in wrap-up mode?
A couple more things to say.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, as we start to think about what else could happen in this book, it seems like we're going to see a little more suffering from Rand, it appears. But go ahead with your other notes.
Okay. 2 things. One, the entire reason Rand got an arrow shot in him is apparently because Gregorin, one of the lords of Ilion, just decided to peace out. And as we're talking about people who might stab Rand, as we're talking about Ashaman, who might be like setting up Rand, I'm starting to wonder about 2 lords in particular. Gregorin and Weiraman are the 2 lords that Rand does not trust, who seem to just be morons, but they're morons in a way that put Rand in danger enough that I'm now worried that they're dark friends. Any thoughts on this? I know these aren't names that you were aware of until I just said them.
When you were doing your summary and I was like maybe clouding over a bit, and then you said Gregorin, I was like, what? Like it was definitely the teacher calling on me when I thought of yeah, I mean, my honest feeling is I don't see them as smart enough and as much of a threat to be dark friends. It just seems like these are more likely selfish lords who just do their own thing and don't like this guy. But I'm open to that possibility, especially since you brought it up.
Weiraman, Gregorin. The last thing I want to talk about in this chapter is it feels like we get just a solid angel on the shoulder, demon on the shoulder at the end of this chapter, right? Bashir is like, we have won. The campaign is over. Sometimes victory means the enemy runs away and you stop chasing them. And all of the too dumb to do anything smart nobles tell Rand we could go to Ibudar, and the Ashaman are basically like, look, we've been killing Damane, we can keep killing Damane. And it's not 100% certain at the end of the chapter, but it really feels like Luce Theron is like, let's kill them all, and Rand is like, yes. And
Yeah.
it feels like the devil wins at the end of this chapter. So what's your take on kind of where we're going from here?
That's how I interpret it. I think we're going to Ibudar, and again, my suspicion is that it's not that will have been a mistake, that they should have stopped here. Like you said, the angels should have won out, both for moral reasons, but also just because something bad is going to happen in Ibudar. And again, if this is really how the Seanchan go out, then it's like, what have we been doing for these few books? So I think something has to shift in this, and I anticipate that it will.
Sometimes if you launch a strike on a country and knock out their nuclear capabilities, you stop and don't go back in a second time, is really the lesson Robert Jordan was trying to get out there. Next week, we only have a single chapter. That is chapter 24, A Time for Iron. And hey, guess what? I'm pretty sure Rand's in it, so we're going to see what happens. What do you expect?
That was my comment before, is I did see it's his icon when I was writing down the chapter name. When it's the dragon, it's pretty obvious. So, yeah, I mean, I'm excited, and that brings us to 100 pages till the end, really. So, as we're working slightly ahead of when people are listening to this, we're really kind of closing in on the end of this, which is really exciting. And so we hope you have enjoyed this discussion and that you consider joining us next week. And until then, my name is Greg, that's Tylor, and we'll see you next time through the glass columns.